Welcome to the Open Channel podcast, where we invite conscious conversation into the embodiment of unity and higher states of conscious awareness. I'm Shaunna Green.
And I'm Avalina Maline. Welcome to this co-created space for people who want to connect and remember their core essence. We are so grateful to have you here with us.
We don't have any agenda.
Nope.
For some reason, I don't know about you, Kiara, but I'm finding it hard to plan topic things. And so if I try to, it just ends up being like work. And so I just have to back away. So again, we don't really have anything planned. So,
yeah, good. But to me, this is all about conversations about life.
Yeah.
And life is always in the moment.
Yep.
And to me, it's been a practice to just look at what's real in this moment and know that that's also appropriate to what so many people are going through. So I don't see that we have individual stories.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's the same story running through individual people.
It is, isn't it? We all think that everything's happening to us, and it's so unique and so personal, and it's not. It's if you could walk around and see everybody's stuff, you'd see the similarities, and that we're all really all going through the same thing, different times. Maybe it looks a little different, but it's like a community experience almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
The universal experience expressed uniquely differently in billions of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how's it being expressed through you in this moment of life?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shaunna.
Oh, well, just I'm called to meet energies that I must have manifested and didn't see the patterns until really sensing into the energies. It's very interesting. It's just a silly little, something that seems mundane, but I'll just, it's in the grand scheme of the universal story, it's just a little snippet, but I think it highlights the energies. So we had gone to visit family for a week, and while we were there, my kids were there was a shop we had gone into. We'd gone into town, and there was a shop they had gone into, and my mother-in-law wanted to get one of them, a souvenir. And so one of them, was drawn to this one little bag, just a small bag, and it had natural materials and some character, and it wasn't exactly the right thing. He looked at it, and he liked it a lot, but really would have preferred it in a small backpack. And so, he wasn't attached and let go of it. Meanwhile, my daughter thought it was really fantastic. So she ended up with the souvenir, and we noticed others like it. And it wasn't, she really loves the bag and takes it everywhere. And it's really great. And she's not super attached to it either, but the same company seemed to make thoughtful items and responsibly. And I didn't think too much of it. And then, my daughter would also point out, we were in other places, and the same manufacturer's things would be in that store, and she'd be like, wow, look, oh, great. I can appreciate beauty and art everywhere. So we came back, and I took my daughter to, she'd grown out of her point shoes for ballet. So I had to get her another pair, and they have to be fitted because they're very specific to the foot. And while we were there, this girl that we knew had come into the store also for the same kinds of things. And she had this pack on, and it was the same beautiful manufacturing, but I didn't realize that at first. It took me till last night to realize it was the same one. And we were both just like, wow, it's lovely. And then didn't think much of it. And so then I was trying to, my son had grown out of his pants. He's gotten taller. And so just thought, okay, I've got to take care of this middle world thing, and came across the same company's goods again. And so, wanted to get him the one that he didn't get the first time. And in the process of that, the same bag that the girl had came up, and it was on sale, really on sale. And it was sort of like the universe had magnetized this thing, even though I wasn't attached to it, even though I hadn't made any overtures of needing it. I'm on the spiritual journey. It's a bag. What do I care? Even though it's beautiful, it doesn't mean I need it. And it was sort of just delivered. And so only at the very last minute did I realize it was the same bag that the girl had on in the store. And it was sort of like this realization that we have drawn things to us, whether you end up getting them or not. It's just that process of what is energetically moving toward you. And just to realize that we have more agency available to us than we had previously possibly understood. At least more than I had understood. I didn't realize that this could happen through my fractal. And so it was an interesting study, and it wove through the collective of the family too in interesting ways. So I don't know. I'm still inquiring into those energies, but it was just an interesting moment. So how about for all of you? What's alive for you in the energies?
Yeah, I'm feeling like moving forward, like how I'm creating things has completely shifted. Like how I'm approaching things and just the ideas that are coming in, like what I want to do moving forward. It's almost like there's such an unknown. Like everything feels so much more unknown, which can be really intimidating. And the way we've created in the past, it always seems like, okay, well, I planned this, I have this idea, and this is what it's going to look like. Da, da, da. But now it's everything's so unknown. It's so open and so vast. Like there's so much possibility, so much potential in everything you do that you just have to almost like step into something of whatever you're creating without having any expectation.
Yeah.
And just much more letting go of what it's going to look like. It's almost like if you're designing a room, for example, you would walk into the room and you'd be like, oh, this is the space, and this is where I'm going to put the furniture, and you design it. But now it's like backwards. Now it's like where there's no room, there's no walls. So you just design a space and then you form the walls around it. So it's really interesting. And it's just a different approach. And it's like you really have to learn to like step in that flow more. And I find it very interesting and challenging at the same time, but really exciting because there's so much more, there's no more limits. It's like the limits are falling away, which makes everything look different,
Completely.
Yeah.
Well, it's a new level of manifestation.
Yeah.
And what happens with me is that almost discombobulated in this body, in this skin at this time, just because everything that was known to me and that I was counting on and trusting in seems to be not so important anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, what am I manifesting? Am I manifesting something that is kind of falling apart, falling away? Or is that part of something, it's like a transitional zone leading to a different level of manifestation as a collective? And when I look at what's going on the planet right now, all the dramas that seem to be taking center stage at any given time. So for 2 years, there was a whole COVID drama, and then that's completing itself. And now the Kiara drama is coming in, and at some point that's going to complete itself. And then who knows what? Maybe there'll be an alien invasion of some kind, false flagged, or maybe there'll be new cycles having to do with the sun, having to do with galactic waves, having to do with Earth's magnetic field, which are severe. I mean, these are all big things we're talking about. We're talking about stuff that could very well end up creating quite a bit of havoc on the planet. And so, how do we see this? And when these things start happening, or if they're happening already, how do we cope with it? So I'm sensing that, if you're attached to a certain level of manifestation or a certain way of living our lives and taking things for granted, it's not happening that way anymore. And so it requires a lot of awareness and centeredness and the willingness to shift without taking anything personally. I know that's a lot of theoretical statements. I could just say that this morning I found out that my mom's in hospital. I was traveling, and so I quickly got on a plane, found my way back to Bangalore, and she had a stroke this morning, coupled with some kind of inability to breathe. So it's like fluid in the lungs, which I think some people call heart failure. And so I was like, okay, what's this all about? What's it all? I haven't seen her yet. I'll probably go see her tomorrow. My brother's with her tonight. So, so many people are going through this with family, with loved ones, not having any kind of certainties about anything, about people that we love, about health, about jobs, about the ability and freedom to travel. All these things are being called into question. Our economy, what's going on with that? Massive earth changes, what's going on with that? And the moment we get into fear around any of it, which is hard to avoid being human, then it's like we get bombarded on so many sides. And it's hard to navigate our way through. So it's very easy at that point to wonder, what am I doing on this planet, and what's my purpose for being here? Feeling like I did something wrong, or the universe is doing something wrong. Going through dark nights of the soul, and all of this. All of us are going through this right now. So the stories may be different, but it's the same stuff going on for all of us. So what does that mean? And that's one of the questions I have right now.
Kiara,
Why are things speeding up so much? Why are people going through so much chaos, so much uncertainty, so much fear?
Kiara, we just want to express so much.
What's the planetary aspect of it? Yeah, you're going to say something, Shaunna?
Oh, sorry. I think the sound is going in and out just a little bit. There's a little, I think the internet's a little spotty, so forgive me for overlapping on some of your words, but just wanted to let you know how much heart goes out to you with all that's moving through your world with your mom and her health situation and the bigger context of that. Just wanting you and anyone who's joining us to know that there's so much grief being experienced by so many, and just know that the collective heart is together in that. and just wanting you to know that you're loved and that your mom is in our hearts.
Yeah, I would love to, maybe at some, before we conclude today, we can, do a little meditation for your mother.
Yeah.
I think that would be lovely to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Shaunna. A lot. I feel like, all of this intensity, over the next few months is going to keep going, and maybe perhaps even getting more intense, and more people, leaving the planet. I think we're going to be, this is what's happening. Yeah, it's like that spiral of, and just as you were saying here about, what's this drama, what's the next thing, it's like, it's getting shorter and the intervals are getting shorter. Like the war, like how long is that going to, it's probably going to be a blip and then it'll be something else. It's like we're heading down that spiral of continuing. Everything's getting more intense and tighter and tighter and tighter till we reach that point, that center point, that neutrality. And that's what it's going to take for all of us as a collective to get there, is we're going to have to ride that wave of intensity till we can all get to that neutral point, that center point, and then we go out the other side. It's going to be a ride for sure.
Sounds like childbirth.
Yeah.
That was my experience of childbirth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think of it, that applies, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. The contractions are getting closer and closer together.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah. And just remembering that.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kiara.
No, I was just thinking of something a friend of mine said once about childbirth. There's all these different stages that involve. So, there's that stage of labor, the first moments of starting this profound journey of birthing, and there's all this pressure and intensity, very new. And then you're going through this journey, transformation coming out of the womb into this other matrix of planetary reality. And, that's the journey of dying to something and being reborn. And then the birth happens, and it's like a new matrix, very Neptunian. You're like surrendering to something bigger than yourself, entering into a matrix that's much bigger than what you left behind. And it takes a whole different adjustment. But right now, we're going through a Pluto return for the US and perhaps for the entire planet. Because, all this that we're talking about has to do with death. And when we talk about death, we're also talking about what comes after. So there's never death without rebirth. It's like looking at one side of the coin and pretending that's all there is. It's all relative. So, and it's something that people are very reluctant to talk about and deal with. Because why? Is it because it's unknown? Is it because it has to do with change and we don't like change? We tend to hold on to what's familiar. And what's obvious is that the world is not going to be stable in the same way that we've counted on for such a long time. Like you're saying, Avalina, it's like the cycles of change are getting faster and faster and faster. So whether we're talking about a collective journey or individual.
Yeah, and it's as you were speaking, I was just seeing, being reminded of that, the fact that energy never, nothing ever really dies. It's just transmuted. It's the energy is just transferring into something else. So it's that whole creation, that whole link. Yeah.
Well, and we're also being called to meet our patterns of perception about what it means to have death. That just, there is a view on what that means. I've had conversations with a dear friend who lost a very close relative in the last month and a half or so, and the grief process that they went through was how to meet grief. It was, what does it mean to be losing a loved one in these times? Is it what we've always perceived, or is there a different way that we're called to meet it now? For example, there's a wonderful teacher, Orland Bishop. I don't know if you are all familiar with Orland, but he does a lot of work around purpose and soul. And my other work job invited him to speak, and he spoke in this beautiful way about the death of his mother, and when that process, I'm sorry, about his father. It was about his father and how he was called to make it a celebration. And so when my friend had told me about her dear relative's passing, I mentioned this story about how Orland had gone into this different way to look at this process of what it means to end a cycle and start a new one. And it was a profound story about how we can meet these cyclical places in a way that allows us maybe to meet a wide range of our own energies, but also to expand and broaden what possibilities are out there as we meet these cycle places.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, as we face death, we're actually doing it like on a collective level. So it's almost like the collective is sort of having that midlife crisis, where all the fears come up, and it's just playing out, and we're just playing that out. But yeah, the total fear of death and what that means, and it's that total surrender to it and letting it unfold, letting that rebirth happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I have to accept the fact that my mom may not come back from the hospital. And what does that mean? Then there's two different realities. One is the very human aspect of it, human emotions, human grief, human hope and wishes. And we all go through that, and we'd be lying to ourselves if we pretend not to. And then there's the other side of it, which is there's no death. It's simply cycles of existence. And that's a celebration. And especially, when you come to a point where your body's failing, where you're ready to let go and move on, and there's new adventures calling. Because so often what we do is hold on to something that isn't serving us anymore. We are trapped in a dysfunctional body, dysfunctional lifestyle, and holding on from fear. And it's not that there may not be a reason for it from a soul level, but if it's based on fear, then it's something to question. And what I've seen of death, when I can be neutral about it, just like we're talking about childbirth, coming into this world, it's a great celebration, it's a transition, it's coming from a tiny little matrix into a larger matrix. It's the same thing with death. Even this, what we call life, is a matrix that's become limited. And as we step into the third and astral bodies, it's like we're entering a bigger matrix and new possibilities new adventures. So it's not a tragedy by any means, except for those who are left behind. Then there's the sadness, then there's the grief, then there's a loss, missing what has been. But for the person who's moved on, it's like when I'm traveling, every place I go is a new adventure. I don't look back at where I've been and try and hold on to the past. Every place I go is a new adventure. And it's the same thing for any of us as we let go of the physical form. But then because our identity is based in the physical form, it is accompanied by so much loss and grief and fear. And so these are the two realities. And yes, we'll probably go through some of both. And for those who have a spiritual perspective, eventually we let go of the linear aspects of life and death and move into that multidimensional awareness where there is simply continuity of soul and purpose. But it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us to arrive at that place. And if it's not easy for us, I can imagine how much more difficult it may be for those who have not thought about these things or who've deliberately avoided these things.
Well, Kiara, it's so helpful to, I think, at least connect with others over the places we're meeting as we walk through all of these steps. What you're sharing and how this thread has moved through the larger collective. They're big energies. They're huge energies that we're meeting. And so to be able to connect with others who are experiencing the same energies can bring at least some sense of larger, I don't know, there's just there's a broadening of the shared experience as we connect with others. And so just, I guess, to honor that collective place of meeting the big energies as these contractions intensify, to know that the intense energies are things that are broadly experienced. And as we connect to how we are a single cell in the enormous human body that's here right now, that is experiencing this labor, that as the intense energies pull in, we're part of that together. And then as they expand, we're part of that together. I guess just to feel the collective experience of that, I think is a beautiful gift in these times, that even though they may be very difficult steps or not, that to walk them together is somehow a unique opportunity that we all have right now. And just grateful to be walking
perhaps
with you.
That's why crisis is so bonding.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to get into that, the wider context.
Yeah.
And if you're not going through it by yourself, if there's other people walking through it with you, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And somehow that means you're not as afraid.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And it's dissolving. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Avalina. I was just going to share that as you were talking, Kiara, that when someone transfers over and they're moving on to bigger and better things where they can grow, or they become stagnant in this life, perhaps. I was reminded of indigenous people, when someone was getting ready to pass, they celebrated. It wasn't a mourning or something to be sad. It was rejoicing that person was moving on to something, more expansive or fit for them. And who are, if you think about who are we to say, because we get attached, like you're saying, on the human level, who are we to say that person's soul, their soul knows exactly what's best for them. Their soul knows exactly when it's time to go. and to do something else. And it's only from this, smaller perspective that it's hard and challenged to see that way. But perhaps we can, as we remember, as we more and more remember on the collective, that it's not the end. It's just a transfer of energy, of a different experience. That maybe we can start to look at death as something to rejoice. That it's not something so heavy and grieving. That it's an evolution, and just allow it to be something of beauty, which it is.
It is.
Yeah.
And there's something you mentioned there, Avalina, when you said this is the way we tend to use language. So you talked about their soul, but that is perhaps the root of our self-imposed limitation, because it's not my soul, it's me. And when I talk about my soul is moving on, that's like I've identified with the personality rather than recognizing myself as a soul who's here to experience a personal story, to experience an incarnation, giving myself a personality to experience this reality, to grow, to face challenges, to connect, and then to leave an incarnation and move on. But if I'm identified with that, that's who I am. But our language is structured in such a way that it feeds the fear of death, because we've limited ourselves in our identity, in our identification with this tiny little self.
Yeah. And Kiara, I'm just curious about how you're doing as you're navigating all of these places, and feel free to be with whatever feels best in this moment. But just how is the experience of meeting this contraction for you? And it's okay if whatever wants to come up is okay.
Yeah, it brings me very present. So if I'm here in this moment, I'm fully engaged here in this conversation. If I know I'll be going to the hospital tomorrow morning, and then I'll be fully engaged with what's happening with my mom. I know it's not easy for her right now. I know she's going through a lot of fear. And that's been her pattern. So it's like, I can't expect that that's going to change. And I've learned how to be present more and more in the midst of chaos, in the midst of sadness and grief and suffering. It's easy to try and be spiritual in a cave somewhere, or hiding away in an ashram. But in the midst of what's going on, whether it's on a personal level or whether it's on a collective level, and to be fully present. I think that's our challenge right now. So, the Incas, I've been looking at the Inca tradition lately, and they don't talk about right and wrong and good and bad and positive and negative. They talk about whether you're in the flow or whether you're resisting the flow. And if you're in the flow, even with all the emotions coming up, even with all the fears coming up, even when things seem to be difficult in the world around or in your own life, being in the flow means you're being present. You're not resisting it by hiding behind something, behind what you wish could be, going back to something that you were identified with in the past. And that's not easy for any of us. But I think that's the challenge, especially right now. Because what I see is, on a big picture, we're actually making the journey from the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, with its very limited perceptions, with its conditioning around duality and right and wrong and good and bad, into something that's more aligned with what the Incas call Sami, the flow. And that's a shift that requires us to expand beyond our limits. And once we can do that, once we learn how to do that, then we can ride the wave much easier.
Yeah.
So I think that's my journey right now. It's not just, it's like, okay, we're all going through Pluto. We're all going through Uranus. We're all going through Neptune. We're all going through stages of beauty and joy and suffering and grief. But none of that is who we are. And I think this is a reminder for us to remember who we are rather than what we're experiencing in each moment. Yeah. And if we can hold both those, I guess I'm speaking for myself because you asked me that question. If I can hold both of those at the same time, then I'd say, I'm in alignment, then I'm in the flow.
Yeah.
I love how that simplifies things, like just staying in the flow, because it just really just distills it all down. All the things we try to practice, and it just still distills it right down to just being in the flow, and it makes it seem so doable. Like it's just it eases the mind of that way of thinking of calling it being in the flow. I love that. Really helpful.
Well, and when we step into a place of judging anything as anything good, bad, or anything else, there is a separation in order to do that. And so we just, I guess we're being called into recognizing any moments of when we might feel anything like that arising, and to allow presence to draw us back, without judging that we may have stepped out. Because sometimes people, especially as we continue on the spiritual journey, we sometimes feel we've done a lot of work, or not. But if we have, sometimes moments like that can catch us off guard, and bring new opportunities for growth. But just to know that that's the experience of being human. We're continually remembering who we are over and over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah, and there's no failure. Sometimes we judge ourselves because we think we are failing. But there isn't failure, not when we're identified with soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're constantly evolving. Every experience, there's no you always gain something from every experience. So how could it be wrong? How could it be not productive? It's all, even if you're still meeting the same conflict over and over in a different way, you're still learning different aspects along the way. You still needed those all along. You're still moving forward.
Yeah, sometimes I ask myself, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen right now? And then just allow myself to dive into it.
Yeah.
So once I can accept the worst thing that can possibly happen, then everything else that happens is perfectly fine. And when I recognize that even the very worst thing that could happen is okay, because what that does is it starts to shift my perspective from personality structure into soul recognition. And from the perspective of soul, there isn't anything bad. There isn't anything that's failure. And there's no death. And therefore, there's no suffering. There's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is biological. Suffering is mental. It's like how we respond to pain, how we respond to changes in our lives, how we respond to what things that are going on that we don't necessarily that we'd rather not have happen, but they're happening anyway. What does that mean? Does it mean that I'm failing? No, it's just part of what's going on. And it's only when I start judging something or interpreting something that it becomes a failure. Yeah. So I think that's the secret of living in our balance, in our center, that we can enter into what is present, recognizing this is the flow right now, without needing to change it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Doesn't mean we don't change it, but without needing to change it based on fear, based on desperation, based on lack, based on sense of failure, based on victimization. Because that's not who we are. We are absolutely beautiful, perfect creator beings. Yeah. Powerful beyond measure.
Yeah, and it's in that space that you're pointing to. That's where the miracles happen. That's when you go into that space of complete neutrality and not judging the circumstances. And exactly what you said about like what's the worst thing that can happen, like going there. And that's exactly what happened with me when I experienced. I had a detached retina in my left eye, and it was the second one I'd had, and I was going to lose my vision, and it was shocking. They wanted to go in surgery right away, immediately, because you'll go blind once you have a detached retina, and it's not possible to heal by itself, blah, blah, blah. And I did exactly what you're talking about. I went right into like, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen? Okay, I go blind. I go blind in my left eye. Perhaps because I can't see out of that eye, it gets lazy and it starts drifting off to the left, and I have to wear glasses. Like I really went all the way into like, what's the absolute worst, and can I be okay with that? And can I be okay with, okay, that's maybe my path, maybe my journey. And when I got into that space of, not having an expectation of just, whatever outcome is fine, just completely neutral, and believing that my body could heal, that's when I literally did not have the surgery, and my eye was able to heal by itself. So it's like coming into that place of not holding on to the expectation and just allowing what is possible to happen. That's the magic. That's the magic formula. I love that. Yeah. Because I got to experience that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that I was called into those places when I was in childbirth myself. We've had this theme of the cycles and the closing of one and the birth into a new. And that was part of the work I did with the midwives that I worked with, just the perception of the experience of the intense energies. And, that many people have a pattern or condition around what it means to feel what's called pain versus what is suffering, where there is a judgment of what's being experienced in the body through a set of patterns. And so instead of, when sensations would come through, calling them, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I hurt, if I was able to go deeper into the sensation of the intense energy and really plunge fully into what the sensations felt like, then I didn't feel a need to call anything pain. It just became sensation, just a live, intense sensation. And I feel the same place emerge as the big energies come in from the universe in these last few weeks, and some of the portals. I've felt those same sensations, almost like childbirth, but the very intense, energetic places in the body. And um, the more I find I can just be in the sensation, the more the experience seems to unfold in its own organic way without needing to have suffering. There is no suffering there. There's
Yeah.
simply sensation.
Yeah.
It's like the saying, there's a fine line between pleasure and pain. It's in it, and it comes down to being in that neutrality.
Yeah.
Then you can allow it to go whichever way you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll share a quick story. Stop me if I've said this before. When I lived in Mount Shasta in Northern California, I was with someone the year before I met her. She had gone through a car accident and she was thrown out, and her spine was broken up in 6 places, and the doctors told her she'd never walk again. But while she was in the hospital, this man would come to visit her. And within 2 weeks, she was out. She was walking. By the time I met her a year later, she was completely healed. We went skiing together the very first time we met. She said when she was in the hospital, the insurance people came to her. And, they made her sign all these forms and all these different categories. And one category was compensation for pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm not going to sign that. I don't want that because there hasn't been any suffering. And, because she truly was in the state of absolute acceptance, joy, grace. And that's how her body was able to heal.
Yeah.
And she said that if she had signed that, she would have closed that circle. And she would have actually given out a signal to the universe that suffering is real. And therefore, she would have attracted that into her life, and she couldn't have healed. So when she was, thrown out of the car, hovering between this world and the next, Saint Germain came to her, one of the masters that she was very connected with, and he asked her, do you want to live or die? Or do you want to stay here, or do you want to go? And she said, I don't care. If there's something for me to do, I'm happy to stay. Otherwise, I'm happy to leave. And so it's like, okay. He said, fine. And then then all these things happened. But she did finally die last year. I don't like saying that. She went through physical death. And she had, such a joyful, beautiful passage. Last night, I had a dream about her. And she was more beautiful, happy, alive than I've ever met, than I've ever seen. So I know how first of all, I do know that life continues. There's no death. And the meeting with her last night was just as real as anything that any other meeting could ever be. This meeting right here. I remember when it was that she passed, I was in Oroville in South India, and I felt someone next to me on the bed, and I realized that's her, that's Patricia, what's she doing here? And then the next morning I heard from a mutual friend that that's exactly the moment that she had passed. So she had come to say goodbye and greetings. But in that whole time, there was never any sadness. I won't say there never was sadness, but there never was grief. There's a difference between them. Sadness is the personal attachment.
I think that's also
yeah.
connected to the cells. Like the body actually grieves. Like you actually miss. So there's a cellular aspect to it as well that being here in these human suits, we have to process as well. Part of our kind of assignment for being here, right? So there's many levels to it. Yeah.
Well, but so supposing tomorrow my mom passes, and the following day she shows up in my dream looking as radiant and alive as Patricia was feeling last night. How could there be grief?
Right.
There'd be attachment maybe to experience that in this world, in the way that I'm familiar with, but that's the mind already trying to hold on to something. And what I'm feeling now is that the events that are going on this planet right now is making it very difficult for us to hold on to something that's familiar from the past in all kinds of ways.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and it just couldn't be more important that we're sharing these things together, that these conversations are taking place, because others need to, just in receiving and hearing about other people's experiences of meeting these places of these big energies, I think it helps others find a new understanding or broaden the perspective of what's possible in meeting them. There's just so much conditioning that sometimes seeing another pattern helps us realize that our way of holding it was a pattern. And so these conversations help bring so many aspects of the experience of these cyclical moments. And so just really appreciating, Kiara, that you're with us and voicing these vulnerable places of what your experience is like. It's just, I think, so helpful for others.
Well, that reminds me of another experience, if I could share. I have a friend who was a good swimmer, and she was out in the ocean near Pondicherry, and the storm came in, swept her out, and took her way out into the ocean, and she couldn't come back, and she swam as hard as she could, and it took her maybe an entire day to be able to come back to shore. By the time she got back, she had gone through such a redefinition of her being that she had no memory of who she was. And she was in a state of absolute bliss. Nothing could change that, because she was not identified with the story of being human.
Wow.
She knew what she had to say if someone asked her something. So there was an instinctive knowledge of how to deal with her human existence. But her complete identification was on the level of soul. And then something strange happened. About a month later, the police finally brought her passport and showed it to her and said, "Are you this person?" And she looked at that picture of her, and suddenly it's like plop, all the human identities started to drop in.
Wow.
And it was like a huge shock to a system. It's like, oh my God, this is who I am. You know, it's like someone who's had amnesia suddenly realizing I am this person. You know, so it's like what was this vast universal identity suddenly collapsing into one single form, one single container of personality. And I'll never forget that because, you know, we tend to live our lives in these tiny containers, forgetting that who we really are is this vastness. What is it that keeps us trapped? Is it some kind of self-inflicted hypnosis?
Yeah.
Well, and
What is it?
how courageous we were, our higher selves, to then make the agreement to come here incarnate. Our higher
Mhm.
selves had to choose this, that this was going to be our journey, to take that vastness and compact it into this
Tiny, weeny,
tiny
weeny little.
thing and forget
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
I
yeah.
always think of it as like a matchbox. Like here's your energy that's just massive and completely universal, and you're trying to squeeze it
Mhm.
in this little itty bitty matchbox.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah,
space,
yeah.
but you gotta get it as
Right,
clear as you can.
I'm
right, right.
picturing all these little beams coming out the sides of the box that you're
Yeah,
describing, Avalina.
yeah. And we identify with that little box, right? We
Yeah.
identify with that matchbox. That's who we are. And just like you were saying, with her experience, she came back in and started to identify with the illusion of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
container. Yeah.
Until that matchbox catches flame.
Yeah.
Mhm.
More
Then you can't stay
transformation.
inside that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just burn it all down.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, please know that we have such gratitude for how you are meeting this experience with your mother, because as each one of us meets this type of experience, or something that's challenging and difficult, with the neutrality that you are and the grace that you are, it helps all of us. It's monumental in how it affects everyone else. It just makes it that much easier for the next time someone else experiences this. It ripples out through the whole cosmos, really. And yeah, we really honor you for your the space that you're holding for yourself, really.
Well, and appreciating too the energies that are moving through in meeting that in order to be meeting it in that way, there are vibratory things that must be existing in order for that to happen, and that is impacting the planet, whether there are words for it or not. But then there are our words bringing forward these energies too. So just appreciating all the forms of expression of that beautiful, courageous light you're shining.
Yeah, it's so hard
You
to
know,
put words to everything.
to expand this out into the collective, um, there's times I just despair for humanity. It's like, when are we going to wake up? Are we going to wake up? I look at all the stupidity of our species,
Oh, yeah.
The pettiness of what we've become. And then I realize, when I was younger, it's like I had this idea that I was here to make a difference in this world. But what that meant is that I had to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. An impossible task. And, from the time I was young, little, I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, way more than I could bear. And so I was never allowed to be a child, or I never allowed myself to be a child. And now what I realize is, okay, so why am I here? Am I here to change the world? Yes, I like to think so, but it's really not my job. I'm just here to be present. And that presence does what's needed. So as long as I'm identified with the little personality self and think I need to change the world, then it just becomes a weight on my shoulders. But if I just remain present, no matter what's going on, recognizing that it's all perfect, and recognizing that we are bigger, we're all of us bigger than we imagine. There's no victims out there. And there's only people who are temporarily attached to fear, who pretend that they're victims. But that's not who they are. And as long as I know that, I know that everything's okay. As long as I begin to take on that weight again, then I treat people as needing to be saved. And then I become the savior. And that doesn't work.
Yeah. That doesn't feel good.
That doesn't feel good. I mean, that's such a limited role and arrogant.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, just being present, really that's all we can do. And as many of us, and like yourself, you come in with so much light and you come in with all this high vibration, it's hard not to think, oh, I'm here. I want to save the world. I can do all these things. It's like that mission of just you, that's just who you are. And so it's hard to witness what's happening and from that perspective, and just really holding compassion for what everyone's experiencing and allowing them to go at their own pace. If this is the pace they need, then that's, and it is challenging to witness that and allow it to happen. Because you can only focus here and just hope that ripples out to everyone else, and just let it be.
Yeah, we're invited into remembering, like we said earlier, remembering over and over again who we are, and remembering that others are having to do the same thing. And so you're mentioning compassion, Avalina. Just can we love our species as it's in forgetfulness? Can we love each other and just keep in mind that we're only given what we're meant to handle in that present moment? Like in that presence you're talking about, Kiara, that's where the ask is. The ask is only in that present moment, and just to meet it fully, and that we're not asked to take more than that on our shoulders.
Right. And the other side of that is that all of us have been lining up for ages to get here, to be birthed on this planet.
Yeah, it's so true. So, I love sharing that same piece. It's like, you realize how hard it was, the waiting list to incarnate here. It's like,
yeah.
What
a blessing.
What a blessing. So I sense that many of us are shuffling back and forth between feeling really grateful for being here, and then at times feeling really depressed.
Yeah, it's the same, like we were saying earlier, with that intensity. It's the same that's happening on our personal level of going in the spiral and getting to that complete place of neutrality. It's like the shifts of going in and out are getting faster and faster, as we shift from dimension, like 1 minute we may be in 3D, and then later, we shift into 5D. It's like, and it's all right here. It's not, we're not going anywhere, and we're just kind of, that intensity of the swing is like getting quicker.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, as a teenager, I'd go through these dark nights of the soul, and they'd last for months. And then my 20s, my 30s, it's like, I'd still go through them, but rather than months, it would just be weeks. And then gradually it's like, okay, it's just days or hours. So there's an awareness in the midst of all that, which allows me to be present. So it doesn't mean that I'm not going to experience the dark night. It just means that I can come out of that easier than before. So I think that's also part of being human. It's like, yeah, we're going through our dark night, but that's part of what gives us, it's like the soul is empowering itself through the dark nights in a way that's hard for the mind to imagine. It's like the mind is very predictable. The mind sees in terms of cause and effect, but the soul sees it very differently.
Yeah. And we're just called into each moment of the unknowing with faith that this is all our plan, that this was the intended unfolding, just that it's all there for our benefit, that it's all there to provide what's needed, even if we can't with the mind grasp what that meaning is. And can we sit with the unknown element of that that in itself, meeting that unknown of the unknown is is another piece I'm finding even more alive in the journey lately, that just in these intense energy weeks, I just feel like I'm having to ask myself less what things mean, or why, the why question doesn't come up as much, because there is more routine patterning felt sense of the unknown being okay. So I don't know if you're sensing that, but just I'm finding more okayness with the unknown and not having to cognitively understand.
Oh,
yeah. And it's showing up in every aspect, all this unknown, like even in my calendar, like clean slate. It's like I'm nothing's being planned in advance. Everything's just happening in the flow of things. My calendar will fill up the week of, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next week or 2 weeks. And that not knowing is totally okay. It's actually, you allow yourself to become more present, and things actually feel more alive. They feel more exciting. When you can embrace that unknown. It's the scary part, but when you do that, it's like, wow, it's like now I'm living.
What I feel, what I find happening in my life, there was a period of my life where I was living quite intensely, traveling, teaching, exploring, writing, just a lot of activity. And I felt like there was a fulfillment in all of that. But in the last 2 years, what I've been feeling is like everything has been falling away. There isn't so much going on. There's more empty space. And there's less inspiration to do anything more than that. I don't know how many people are going through the same thing. Yeah. I don't feel like traveling, writing, teaching. I don't feel like I need to, put things together in this grand, big picture design. It's like ordinary things are okay. Just walking on the beach is fine. And I don't need to be looking at life and death issues every single moment of my life.
Yeah, I feel that as well. The relaxing of everything. It's just like the out breath. It's like there was a massive in breath, and now it's like this massive out breath, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. And then, well, I like what that image, because when the in breath comes, it's going to be also quite intense. So we need that.
We need this. Yeah.
That space to breathe out before the next wave comes in.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a big wave. This is what
Really?
we've prepared all our lives for.
Yeah.
For much more than just this incarnation too, that our
Yeah.
souls have been evolving to meet this place for eons. So couldn't be more dynamic times in those breaths. And I'm just wondering if maybe, Avalina, you mentioned having us take a moment
Yeah, I'd like to do
in
that.
going inward. Maybe we can just honor these cycles and all who are meeting the big energies of these cycles, whether it's expressed through the ending of cycles of dear ones or in whatever ways they're coming up.
Yeah, how do you feel about that, Kiara?
Yeah, do you want to lead us in a meditation?
Shaunna, you want to lead?
Sure.
Because I know you're good at that.
Everybody here is good at that. But why don't we just take a moment to really sense what's alive in the body. So noticing where your seat meets your chair. Just what sensations are alive there. Maybe it's the warmth that you feel as your clothes are near the warmth of the surface of the chair. Maybe it's a pressure, feeling how gravity is pulling and holding you to this earth. And just sensing the breath, whether it's the big collective breath that we were just speaking of, or on the micro level, your breath in your lungs, in this instrument, your physical form. You feel it in the lungs expanding and then contracting out. Just taking a moment here in silence, just really feeling what's alive in the body. Just how are the energies moving through your form? Is there a vibration you feel that needs attention? Maybe an area of tension, or perhaps just wide, expansive attention. And so connecting with the cycles that may be moving through your field of awareness in whatever form that takes. Is there a cycle that's nearing a completion? As a new beginning is on the horizon? What does it feel to sense the energy of a completion of a cycle? Are there emotions that come through? Just allowing the body to meet whatever comes up. And knowing you're not alone as you meet this place. knowing that here we sit together, holding one another as an ending may be arriving, but just holding the present sensation of what's here now. We are here in love together. Embracing one another through whatever just is. And so we sit in community, in gratitude for this shared experience, this experience of evolution. So just take one more moment here, holding yourself with compassion and others as well. As we evolve into whatever is the next birthing. Now just allowing the remembrance of this room, your furniture. Maybe wiggle your toes a little, coming back to this space. If you feel ready to open your eyes, that's fine. If not, that's okay too. Just being with whatever's present. Just feeling such love.
Waves of gratitude.
Such deep appreciation for each of you and for our collective growth as we meet the present moment, whatever that looks like.
And thank you, Kiara, for being here with us during this time and sharing your heartfelt experience and what you're going through. It is so precious to each of us to be able to, share in our experiences and go through them together. It's just really opens my heart so much. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah. And please let us know how your mother's doing.
Please.
Sending her so much love and an easeful journey over the next few weeks of however that turns out, whether it's healing or whatever is unfolding for her, that she is able to go through that with grace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all healing.
Yeah.
So just letting the soul decide and take over.
Yeah. Much love to both of you so much. And everyone here listening, thank you. Thank you.
So much love and deep gratitude.
Oh.